My friend from Pro Football Talk, he kicks off our day every single day here on NBC Sports on Peacock with Pro Football Talk Live. Mike Florio back here in the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great, Rich. How are you today?
I'm fine. So the Tampa Bay Times story about Antonio Brown's vaccination card, whether it's real, whether it's not, how can the league possibly investigate this? They say they're looking into it, but what would that even mean?
Well, first I'll say this. If they had created odds at PointsBet of the players most likely to be accused of having a fake vaccination card, it would have been minus 250 for Antonio Brown, wouldn't it? I mean, isn't he just the one that you would think of first? There are others who I won't name since they have yet to be accused of having a fake vaccination card. But Antonio would have been near the top, so he came through. Go cash your ticket. And in all seriousness, the league has the power to resolve this pretty quickly depending upon the quality of the documentation that the Buccaneers retained, the quality of the documentation that Antonio Brown retained. In Rick Stroud's excellent story, Alex Guerrero, of all people, is the one who was at Brown's house a couple of days before training camp opened and took a picture of Brown's vaccination card and delivered it to the team's head trainer. Now, the league doesn't get the vaccination cards. My understanding is the team isn't required to keep the vaccination cards. But, Rich, from the information on a vaccination card, it is very simple for an employer to verify the accuracy because it provides the name of the person who got the shot, where the shot was administered, the lot number of the vaccine, depending upon whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and the date. And if any of that information is false, when you try to confirm the accuracy of what's on that vaccination card, it's all going to be exposed quickly. They're not going to have a record that that individual had a shot that day at that place from that lot number of that vaccine, period. And there have been enough rumors and rumblings of fake vaccination cards floating around that I think it's incumbent on some of these teams to maybe do it themselves. And now the league can do it. And now the question is, how far down the rabbit hole are they going to go? Are they going to check Antonio Brown's, or are they going to do a more comprehensive audit of all teams, the Buccaneers and all other teams, and find out how many other fake vaccination cards have or haven't been used? That's really the question. They can go a long way here. How broadly do they brush, or do they just focus on Antonio Brown? But they should be able to get to the bottom of this if they want to.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, just the league-wide, check of everybody's vaccination card. It's like, come on, I don't know what else to say other than the fact, like, what a damn shame that would have to be if they get to that point in time, and what a monumental sort of logistical problem that might actually look at. But maybe they throw it on the teams. I don't know. But what would the punishment be for this?
Well, but I look at it this way, Rich. Either you care or you don't care about people who are showing up and pretending to be vaccinated when they really aren't. I mean, that's the worst violation of the protocols that you could imagine. They create two buckets, one for the people who are vaccinated, which are much more lenient and favorable, and then the protocols that apply to those who choose not to be vaccinated. If you are pretending both internally and externally, for Aaron Rodgers it was just externally. For someone with a fake vaccination card, it's externally, internally, for all purposes. If you're pretending to be vaccinated, and these cards, I could print one out. I mean, I can't imagine it would be that hard to create a forged vaccination card because a lot of the information is handwritten on these things. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that they should have been more vigilant about it from the get-go, and now the question is how vigilant are they going to be after the fact. But it's a violation of the personal conduct policy if it's proven, and that's particularly bad news for Antonio Brown because he already has a suspension on his fairly recent past, 8 games last year for a conduct policy violation arising from multiple off-season issues. He'd be treated as a repeat offender, and he'd be subject to enhanced penalties. Now, I have no idea what the baseline penalty would be under the conduct policy because this is unprecedented, but whatever it is, it would likely be even greater for him because of his past issues. So he's looking at a problem here if the league is able to show that he did have a fake vaccination card.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. So the rest of Week 11, let's hit it right here. Is Kyler Murray going to go? Do you think? What are you hearing about on the injury front with one of the star role players of a team that's lost a couple out of their last 3?
Well, on Football Night in America, we explained that he was making progress, and if the progress continues, he'll play. One of the big factors here is that they have their bye after this Sunday's game against a very desperate Seahawks team. So do you give him that extra week? And a lot of it depends upon just how comfortable the Cardinals ultimately are putting him out there. And you could say, well, if he gets banged up a little bit, if he has a little aggravation, he's got 2 weeks until his next game. So I think that given that there isn't a ton of margin for error if you are trying to win the division with the Rams, and they got a little bit of a bonus on Monday night when the Rams lost, you don't want to extend one loss to 2 in a row going into your bye week, and I suspect he's going to play. And, maybe they'll be watching him closely. If there's any sign of any aggravation, then they'll get him out of the game. But I suspect he's going to play.
What about this Sunday night, football night in America with Big Ben? Do you think he's going to hop on a flight in the next 24 hours and play 48 hours from now?
I don't know of any player who has been able to come back faster than 10 days when vaccinated and testing positive for COVID. One of the inducements to get guys to choose to be vaccinated is, hey, if you're vaccinated and test positive, you get to come back if you generate a negative test within or at a minimum of 24 hours apart. But it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen within 10 days. It doesn't happen within 5 days. We've seen it with 7 days, et cetera. It'll be 8 days for Ben Roethlisberger. I'd be surprised if he ends up being able to play. But ultimately, it's not like any other injury that you can, tape your ankle or whatever. You either test negative or you don't twice, at least 24 hours apart. And, the fact that it's in L.A. is another complication. If they were playing at home this weekend, he could, I guess, in theory, test negative, mid-afternoon on Sunday and be good to go.
So that's Sunday night football. And then the Cleveland Browns, they took Nick Chubb and Felton off of the COVID list today. So it looks like he's going, right, for Cleveland this weekend?
Yeah, the one thing to remember, though, and Chandler Jones went through this, he missed a game because he was positive for COVID, and then once he came back, he missed another game because he'd lost like 15 pounds while fighting COVID. So when you plug a guy right back in, we had this question last week with Aaron Rodgers, you plug a guy right back in, is he going to be ready to go in 48 hours when he hasn't been around, when he hasn't been practicing, and when he possibly has had some negative effects of that positive COVID diagnosis? So it's wait and see, but he's back, which is the biggest hurdle to clear if you want to get on the field, but it wouldn't be unprecedented if for some reason he's limited or just flat out unable to go.
I think Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk here on the Rich Eisen Show. I want to get this right. I should have had it open, but your headline of your coverage of the NFL, Walt Anderson sending out a video of what players can and cannot do to avoid being in the zone of making a referee call you for a taunt or a posture. It was perfect. Like, players not being able to contain themselves emotionally, that the NFL is backing the play of players needing to contain themselves emotionally, their basic human emotions. Like, why is the NFL just going further and further to a point where even on Dan's show, which is between yours and mine every day on Peacock, Sean Payton, who's on the competition committee, says they're overfishing. That what's happening on the field isn't even remotely close to what they were talking about in the meetings. Why are they doing that?
Well, I don't get it. Rich McKay, the chair of the competition committee, when they announced the latest point of emphasis on taunting, they did this in 2014, and they did it again this year. He made it clear that they want to get rid of the in-your-face jawing between players who then may have a vendetta that gets acted out upon later, either through a fight or through an effort to go take a shot at a guy, a legal shot, but a gratuitous, unnecessary shot at a guy during a play. They don't want to have a guy keeping score, I'll get this guy. That's what they're trying to avoid. At some point, it morphed into this broader concern about posturing toward an entire sideline, and that was the Cassius Marsh thing. And see, when you're not wired or willing to admit a mistake and you double down, number one, you create a bunch of criticism, and frankly, I think the league liked the focus on the Cassius Marsh thing because it took away emphasis from the ridiculous low block call that took a touchdown off the board that same night, and I've been told that that's true, that they love that distraction because that was an indefensible call by Tony Correnti. But now you've got this posturing standard, and I've already got coaches sending me examples of similar conduct that isn't flagged. See, how are you going to call this consistently? That's the separate issue, whether we agree with the rule or not, and most people don't, at least especially how it's being applied in some cases. Now, if you're not applying it and enforcing it consistently, that's a problem, because then it all seems too subjective. It seems random. It seems like, we just pull the flag out when we feel like it. And the NFL needs to be concerned about that, because you don't want to give people any plausible basis to think that the fix is in. And I firmly believe the fix is never in, but I also would prefer that people don't have a plausible argument that the fix could be in. I don't like that. And they need to be as vigilant as they can. If they're going to enforce this rule, they've got to enforce it all the time, and they've got to enforce it consistently, or it is going to create these situations where people are like, something fishy is going on here.
So what? But who's the one pushing it now? Like, I understand before it was, John Mara representing ownership and Rich McKay representing upper management, and Tomlin and Peyton and whoever else is on that committee representing coaches, and there was a coaching committee that actually forwarded it to the competition committee. I understand how it was born, but why are we seeing it now like this? Like, who's sitting there saying, let's back Correnti? And I understand you say they're covering up for other calls, and that's just in the here and now. I mean, that's just between weeks 9 and 10, right? Just to get to game action in week 10 to change a narrative or what have you. But why send out this video from Walt Anderson to everybody, basically, again, putting it in the lap of the players? We're already telling a player that, hit the proper strike zone during the game, even though the person that you're hitting changes his body position. That might make you hit a part of the strike zone you weren't intending to hit. We're already laying that on the players. Why are we now saying, don't put us in the position of making the stupid call of having somebody wordlessly posture at a sideline as a taunt? Why? Who's doing that?
Well, I think here's the reality. There's a combination of personalities and mindsets in the league office and the people who actually have the ear of the commissioner. And once you start down the path of defending bad calls whenever and however you can, minimal transparency, long gone are the days of the Dean Blandinos and the Mike Pereiras who could appear on NFL Network's Total Access and explain and admit when maybe a referee went a little bit too far. You never get that now. You get, if anything, and we've seen him each of the past 2 weeks, Perry Fuel, who works with the officiating function now, will do an 80-second video where he just says, here's the call, and here's why it was made, and here's why it was right, and you move on to the next one. There's no acknowledgement of mistake, and I think this thing that went out this past week with the memo and the video is a product of this effort to defend the Correnti call, back up this standard, and put it all on the players. This is it. Hey, we don't want to have to do this. We don't want to have to turn this car around. This is going to hurt us more than it hurts you. Any other cliche you want to throw in there, it's your fault if we do it. It's not our fault for being overly officious.
Right.
You're on notice of what you need to avoid. And, the reality is you're going to see, the coaches who understand the linear connection between 15 yards of field position and winning and losing games, like Bill Belichick, making sure his guys understand it. You may not like it, but you got to understand it, and you got to control yourself, just like you have to control yourself when it comes to holding or any other foul that could be called against a player.
Same thing as just don't reach for the pylon. Some teams do it, and some teams don't, and it's, I guess, the latest example of that, because you don't want to run afoul of the rule book. I just don't like. Again, it's like taking the targeting rule and applying it to celebrations. And that's when you're going to get, as you've pointed out, some inconsistency in actually calling it. And I don't understand why they want to go in that direction. I don't understand. It would have been very simple as saying, we of course, we don't want somebody wordlessly staring at a sideline on Monday Night Football with 3 minutes to go in a game, costing anything like that. Of course, that's not what we want. We want everybody just to tone it down.
Hey, Sim said on PFT Live the day after that game, how do we know that the guy's mom wasn't in the front row? And he was saying, look, Ma, look at me, Ma, look what I did. We are inferring meaning from someone's bodily motions, and it's one thing if you've got two guys who are right in each other's faces. Then you know it when you see it.
Right.
I think that's what makes it a little more difficult. We're applying the Potter-Stewart standard in situations where you're making some assumptions that may not be warranted, and how do you know for sure that that's what that guy was doing? And how is that going to set the stage for further issues? If the whole thing is we want to nip in the bud any possibility of either extracurricular stuff or permissible from snap to whistle hits that are born of this desire to get back at a guy, if that's the goal, why are you saying you can't posture an entire sideline? I mean, logically the whole thing continues to collapse, but they're not going to admit they were wrong. So they're going to, as we said, they're going to make sure the players know what the rule is and expect the coaches to coach it that way. And if you get flagged, it's your own fault. It's not our fault.
Last thing for you, I got a couple minutes, but I've been curious to get your thoughts. What about Gruden's lawsuit? Where does that go? What do you think happens here? What's the goal? To get discovery and get more emails out that people don't want to see? I mean, what is the goal?
Well, the argument's very simple. If the emails hadn't become public, he probably wouldn't have been fired by Mark Davis. Now, I don't know that Mark Davis is going to get on a witness stand and say if this had all been done privately and they had sent them to me, I wouldn't have fired him. I would have said, oh, this happened before he came to work for me. I want to keep Jon Gruden as my coach. Once the emails are out, it becomes untenable. And his argument is a very strong statement, an allegation that the NFL denies, but the argument is you specifically targeted me, you tried to take me out, and you took me out by releasing these emails. So, there will be some initial preliminary procedural issues. I think the NFL will try to find a way to argue that the entire dispute should be resolved in arbitration, because that's the first thing that any major business tries to do when it's sued. It wants to get it out of the court system and get it into a much more discreet and much more favorable to business interests type of a setting. And then, we'll fight that for 6 months, 10 months, who knows how long. But, yeah, if this thing survives in court, you'll have people who are questioned under oath. You'll have documents that are produced. And certain things will be subject to a protective order, but certain other things will be attached as exhibits to documents that are filed. That's how we've gotten a glimpse of some of the things in the St. Louis relocation litigation. So this is going to hang around for a while. The NFL is going to fight it. But at some point, and this is what they should have done after the St. Louis litigation ended up not making its way to arbitration. At some point, you got to recognize when the time is right to write a check, because the damage that ultimately can be done is a lot worse than whatever amount you pay to make this thing go away. And they need to be ready to do it at the right time with Gruden, or who knows what's ultimately going to come out.
Mike, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving, and let's chat after that.
All right, thanks, Rich.
Right back at you. That's Mike Florio right there on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.